They placed me by the kitchen doors, not beside anyone important, just tucked in near a table of strangers and the staff station, where the clink of trays and staff whispers drowned out any illusion that I belonged. I knew better than to ask for another seat. That would only turn quiet disrespect into visible discomfort. So I stayed there, folding my napkin, adjusting my son's tiny tie, and pretending I didn't notice the second-tier view of my own sister's wedding. Celeste was the bride, 5 years younger, always 5 years more adored. She looked radiant, I'll admit. Her dress caught the candlelight with every step, and her laughter moved through the tent like a song everyone already knew the lyrics to. But the chair they gave me had no cushion. The edge of it dug into my back as if to remind me comfort wasn't reserved for spectators, and my name card had been typed Marla, not Mara. I didn't correct it. I didn't need them to remember me now. They'd already chosen who belonged in the front row of this story. My son Evan sat beside me, legs swinging beneath the linen-covered chair. He was only 8, and he had no idea what kind of place we held in this family. Not yet. "Mama," he whispered, "do you think we get cake soon?" I smiled. Probably. The toasts began after the plates were cleared. One by one, the microphone passed between groomsmen with loud jokes, bridesmaids with teary voices, and our father, whose toast mentioned the vintage wine more than either of his daughters. Then Celeste took the mic. A hush fell over the tent. Everyone leaned in, expecting glamour, charm, a perfect bridal punchline. She didn't look at me. Not yet. She smiled at the guests first, the people who mattered. Then she lifted her glass and said, "Before dessert, I want to thank the people who shaped me." Her tone was light, familiar. "I want to thank my new in-laws," she continued, "who welcomed me with open arms, my husband, who's somehow still standing after months of wedding planning, and my big sister." Now she turned. Every face turned with her. "She's always been the strong one," Celeste said, and I held my breath. "The practical one. The sister who figured things out while I figured myself out. She raised a child on her own, moved more times than I can count, and even found time to show up tonight, on time too." Laughter. The kind that isn't really laughter, just a ripple of nervous energy when people aren't sure what they're laughing at yet. "She's proof that life doesn't have to be glamorous to be resilient," she said, "even if you're still figuring things out at 37. More laughter, this time less nervous. "Have you ever been thanked in a room full of people, only to feel smaller with every word?" "She's like a second mother to me, and sometimes, a mother who could have used a little more blush and a little less pride." She paused for effect. "But hey, we can't all be the bride." The room broke into polite applause. Evan tugged at my sleeve. "Mama, why's she saying that stuff?" I swallowed, hard. "Don't worry, sweetheart." "I mean it," Celeste said, still smiling. "Every bride needs someone to show her what not to do. Mara, you've been my example since day one." My hand froze around my fork, not in anger, but restraint, the kind you practice like a second language when raised to keep the peace. I didn't lift it, I didn't speak, I didn't blink. "I just want to say thank you," she finished. "You've reminded me how far I've come, and how lucky I am to be standing here today." The guests clapped. Some looked at me, most didn't. Evan's little voice broke through again. "Was that a joke?" I didn't answer. Then, softly, from the head table, a chair scraped against the wooden floor. It was Graham, Celeste's groom. He stood without rush, his face unreadable. He stepped toward her and gently reached for the microphone. Celeste blinked but handed it over. Graham turned to the guests, his voice quiet, steady. "I was planning to thank our families tonight," he began, "but something else feels more important now." The air shifted. "I didn't know what kind of person my wife becomes when she's got a spotlight," he said, "but tonight I learned something." He looked around the tent, his eyes resting momentarily and unmistakably on me. "What we celebrate says everything about who we are," he said, and what I heard just now didn't feel like celebration. The room was frozen. Celeste's smile vanished, one muscle at a time. "I hope this marriage brings out the best in both of us," Graham said, handing the mic back to the MC. "But tonight, let's remember who deserved kindness and didn't get it." He sat down, that was all. No dramatic pause, no apology, just truth, spoken without cruelty. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I just looked down at Evan, who stared up at me like he'd just seen something quiet and important. And for the first time in a very long time, I didn't feel forgotten. I felt seen. The music returned, soft jazz murmuring beneath the clink of forks and unfinished conversations, but it couldn't erase the tension between the head table and mine. People turned back to their wine, their phones, their polite murmurs, but the air had shifted, and I wasn't the one who caused it. Celeste disappeared, maybe to fix her lipstick, maybe to recover her pride. I didn't wonder. I didn't care. Evan leaned his head against my arm, thumb brushing the edge of his napkin. "Mama," he said, "was that man helping you?" I looked down at him. His eyelashes were long, just like his father's, though his father hadn't stayed long enough to notice them. "He was speaking the truth," I said, "and that matters." Because no one had ever done that for me in public, not when I dropped out of graduate school to raise Evan, not when Celeste called me uptight at Christmas, not when Mom compared our lives like mine was just a rough draft of Celeste's final chapter. But Graham had stood, without anger, without theater, just enough to tilt the entire room. As I sipped my water, trying to ground myself, I saw a man begin walking toward me. He didn't hesitate, didn't glance around first, just moved with the quiet precision of someone used to being listened to. Navy suit, tall, lean, silver hair, cropped short. Graham's father, William Arden, the man who'd earlier looked me over like I was a question he didn't need answered. He stopped at my table and extended his hand. I stood slowly and shook it. "Miss Marla, is it?" he asked, repeating what the card had said. "Mara," I corrected. "No L." He nodded. "Mara, forgive me, I should have asked sooner." His voice was measured, polished, but behind it, I saw something else. The discomfort of someone rethinking the version of the story they'd been handed. "I don't make a habit of interrupting women's speeches," he said, "but I was raised to believe a toast is meant to uplift, not belittle." I didn't respond. I didn't need to. He looked at Evan. "Your boy?" I nodded. "Evan." William knelt, not stiffly but with purpose, and offered his hand. Evan shook it, cautious but curious. "Nice grip," William said. "Strong." Evan smiled just a little. Then William stood again. "If it's not too late, I'd be honored if you'd join our table for dessert. Graham would like that. So would I." I blinked. For a split second, I thought maybe this was guilt, rich man reparations for a social faux pas, but the way he looked at me said otherwise. It wasn't pity. It was recognition. "I don't want to be a disruption," I said gently. "You already were," he replied, "just not in the way she expected." He didn't wait for a response, just offered a courteous nod and walked back toward the head table. Evan tugged my sleeve. "Mama, can we go?" I smoothed his collar. Let's give it a moment. I didn't have makeup to fix, no allies in blush satin, no curated excuse to slip away. But I had been seen, not by Celeste, not by the people I had tried to impress my whole life, by someone who had no reason to defend me, yet did. Across the room, my mother finally stood. She moved slowly, glass in hand, mouth already forming that familiar, gentle lacerating tone she reserved for inconvenient truths. "Mara," she said, touching the back of my chair, "we didn't expect all that." "I didn't either," I said. "She's under a lot of pressure. These weddings are enormous undertakings. The seating arrangements alone." "You put me by the kitchen," I said, not accusing, just naming it. She blinked. "Well, there was limited space near the front. You understand?" "I do," I said. "I understand more than you think." She shifted. "Let's not ruin this night." "I'm not the one who did." She didn't reply. Didn't apologize. Just smiled the kind of smile people use when they're hoping you'll let them escape the weight of what they know they did. And she walked away, glass still full. But I felt emptier. The music changed again. Upbeat, a bit too cheerful. People stood to smooth their dresses to pretend the world hadn't tilted 20 minutes earlier. Near the cake stand, Celeste reappeared, surrounded by blush bridesmaids and linen-vested groomsmen. She was laughing again, like nothing had happened. Like I was disposable. Evan looked up. "I like the music." "Me too," I said, though I couldn't hear it over the hum in my chest. Then came the voice, clear, warm, certain. "Mara." I turned. Graham stood, one hand gesturing to an empty seat. Beside him. Not behind, not tucked away. Right next to the groom. I hesitated. But Evan reached for my hand. "Let's go, Mama." And so we walked. Past the looks, past the whispers. Past Celeste, frozen, unreadable. She didn't say anything. Neither did I. Because I already had, in silence. I didn't plan to stand. I had no strategy. No moment rehearsed. I came to this wedding only to keep peace, keep distance, and keep my son from asking why we weren't invited to things anymore. But when Graham called my name, I stood. It wasn't defiance. It was gravity, quiet, invisible, undeniable. Evan reached for my hand as we walked. The tent floor was lined with scattered petals and flickering lights, now beginning to dim into soft evening amber. I could feel the eyes on me, not cruel, not mocking, just watching. As if they had missed something before, or someone. Graham pulled out the chair beside him. And I sat. Directly across from Celeste. She didn't hide her expression this time. Her jaw clenched slightly, the corners of her mouth twitching in a smile too small to reach her eyes. "Glad you could join us," she said, lifting her glass. I gave a small nod. "Thank you." That was all. But she heard it, and so did everyone else. The dessert plates were set before us with tiny forks and perfect slices of triple-tiered lemon cake. I noticed the monogrammed fondant topping, C+G. But the initials felt imbalanced now, like the G had begun to shift. "Did you like the speech?" Celeste asked, too casually. I met her eyes. "Which one?" "A beat." She laughed, forced and crisp. "You always were good with comebacks, not always on time, but clever." I didn't take the bait. Graham's hand rested on the tablecloth, not touching hers, just still. And then the music paused. The bandleader approached the microphone and announced, "It's time for the cutting of the cake." The crowd clapped. Some rose to gather around the stand. The photographer appeared like clockwork, adjusting the lens, calling out, "Bride and groom, right here." Celeste stood, a flourish in her step, her train trailing behind her. Graham rose more slowly, but before he reached her side, he turned, offered his hand to Evan. "Want to help us cut it?" he asked gently. My son lit up like morning. "Can I, Mama?" I nodded. "Go." He scrambled around the table, fingers brushing past Graham's sleeve as they walked together toward the cake. The moment should have been charming, symbolic, a merging of old and new. But Celeste froze. Just for a second, just long enough for the camera to catch her looking unsure. She took the knife from the table, smiling again for the crowd. "Well, looks like we're making this a family affair," she joked, gesturing toward Evan. No one laughed. Not because the line was mean, it wasn't, but because something about the moment had shifted. The groom now held my son's hand in front of a 3-tiered cake, and the bride looked suddenly extra. When they made the cut together, Graham handed the first slice not to Celeste, but to Evan. Then the second, to me. A gasp somewhere in the room. I took it gently. Celeste's mouth opened slightly, then closed. Her own mother watched from her seat but said nothing. Maybe she didn't know what to say, or maybe she did, and chose silence. That I could understand. I lifted my fork, but I didn't eat. I just looked at Evan's smile as he took the tiniest bite of cake, trying not to smear frosting on his little vest. Celeste returned to her seat slower this time. The DJ resumed with something upbeat, but the tempo felt mismatched with the air in the room. People danced, but glances kept drifting back to our table, to the bride, the groom, the boy, and me. My mother approached again, this time with Celeste's maid of honor trailing close behind, still in heels too high for grass. "We should talk," Mom said, voice sharper now, lower. "In private." I rose, but not all the way. There's nothing private about what happened earlier. Celeste folded her arms. "You're making this into something it's not." I tilted my head. "Then why do you feel the need to say that?" She took a breath, lips pressing together in practiced patience. "This is my day, Mara. You've had plenty of days." A small laugh escaped me. "Name one." She blinked. "One day," I repeated, "where the family showed up for me like this, where you sat in the back while I stood in a spotlight." Silence. The maid of honor excused herself. The moment was growing too thick. "I'm sorry if you feel—" Celeste started. "Stop," I said quietly. "Don't do that. Don't apologize for how I feel. Just own what you said, what you meant." I wasn't angry. I wasn't shaking. I was just done pretending that love without respect was still love. Graham returned, now without Evan, who was happily being spun in circles by a flower girl with sticky fingers and zero inhibition. "Everything okay?" he asked softly. "Fine," I said. Celeste gave a tight nod, as if to close the curtain on the scene. But Graham didn't move. He looked at Celeste carefully. "You've never asked me why I fell for you." She tilted her head. "What?" He spoke plainly. It wasn't the dress, or the way you fill a room. It was the way you stood up for your friends, for your dreams, for your sister, back when you used to. Then he looked at me. And just like that, the camera in the corner clicked again, without flash. The picture it caught wasn't a bride and groom cutting cake. It was a man quietly remembering the kind of woman he thought he was marrying. And a sister who no longer had to prove what kind of woman she already was. The flower girl twirled past our table, frosting smeared across her tiny lace gloves. Evan laughed, hands in the air like a boy who finally felt welcome in a place he had once been warned to behave. I hadn't said much since the cake. I didn't need to, because silence, when paired with truth, becomes impossible to ignore. Celeste tried to laugh, to smile, to spin things back in her favor. She wrapped her arms around guests like a pageant queen in full costume, but the sparkle in her eyes had dulled. I could see it. So could everyone else. That was when Kayla approached. Her maid of honor, her college roommate, the woman in the champagne-colored dress with a voice that always arrived half a second before Celeste's mood shifted. She didn't bother with a hello. "You've made your point," Kayla said, lips tight, hands folded over her clutch. "It's her wedding, Mara. Don't you think it's time you stepped back?" I turned slightly in my chair, resting one elbow on the edge of the table. "Did I say something?" She narrowed her eyes. "Number, that's the problem. You just stand there and make her look bad." "I didn't ask to be here." "Number, but you came." I looked toward the tent opening, where Evan was now dancing with the groom's mother, her elegant scarf fluttering in rhythm to a beat neither of them cared to match. "I came for my son," I said softly, "and because I was invited. You remember that, don't you?" She didn't answer. Because of course I had been invited. The invite had arrived late and without a +1, but it had come, and I had RSVP'd just as late, knowing what I was walking into. "I'm just saying," Kayla added, "this isn't about you." "That's the line she always uses," I said quietly, "when she forgets I'm a person." Kayla exhaled sharply. "You think this whole thing is a conspiracy to humiliate you?" "No," I said, "I think it's a habit." That stopped her. Because she knew it was true. Celeste hadn't become this person overnight. Her love had always come with conditions. Play your part, don't make noise, laugh when I make you the joke. And I had followed the script for years, until motherhood taught me that protecting your child often means finally protecting yourself. Kayla leaned in. "She's your sister. Don't ruin this day just to feel better." "I don't feel better," I said. "I feel seen." "There's a difference." And then I stood. Not to confront, just to breathe. The open air beyond the tent was cool against my arms. The sun had dipped below the vineyard hills, casting golden shadows across rows of Cabernet vines. I walked slowly past the edge of the tent, where servers refilled glasses and couples stepped onto the dance floor. My feet found the gravel path leading toward the guest house, quiet, dimly lit, removed. And then I heard the voice behind me. "You could have let me have this." Celeste. Her heels clicked against the stones as she caught up to me, veil now pinned back and voice lower than it had been all evening. I stopped. "I wasn't trying to take anything," I said. "You didn't have to try," she hissed. "You just walked in and became the center of it." I turned, slowly. I didn't ask Graham to stand up for me. I didn't ask your father-in-law to invite me to his table. I didn't ask your best friend to threaten me near the bar. You make everything about you, Mara, she said, arms folded. You always have. The single mom act, the struggling sister routine. People feel sorry for you, and you soak it up like it's a spotlight. That stung. But only for a second. Then I said, you know what the difference is between pity and respect? She didn't answer. Respect doesn't need to be announced. It shows up when no one's watching. Celeste's eyes flashed. So you're the victim again. No, I said, not today. She exhaled, slower now. Her voice softened just enough to feel dangerous. You always made me feel like I had to win. I don't know why. I never made you feel that, I replied. That was already inside you. The breeze picked up then, lifting the edge of her dress. I needed this day to be perfect, she said. I know. And now everyone's whispering about you. No, I said quietly. They're whispering about who you chose to become. She opened her mouth, then closed it. That was when the music faded again. A new announcement rang from the tent, the DJ calling all guests back in for the final dance before the bride and groom's exit. She didn't move. I did. I turned and walked slowly toward the tent again, not rushed, not victorious, just steady. And when I arrived, I saw Evan waiting at the table, a small paper bag of macarons clutched in one hand and his jacket draped over his chair. He smiled at me. You okay, Mama? I am, I said. Are you? He nodded. I danced 3 songs. That's more than me. He reached up, took my hand. Let's do one together. And we did. We danced. Not in the center of the floor, not to be seen. Just in a small space beside the heaters, where the light was soft and the music was fading into something slower than the rest of the night. As we swayed, I caught Graham watching from across the room. He didn't smile, he didn't nod. He just watched. And in that look, I knew. This story would never be about me again. It didn't need to be. Because I had already reclaimed my name without raising my voice. When I was 13, Celeste locked me in the attic for almost an hour. It was just a game to her, hide and seek with uneven rules. I had gone up there to look for a missing board game. Mom said it might be in a box, and Celeste followed behind me, smiling sweetly the whole time. Then I heard the door slam, the bolt click, and her footsteps running back down the stairs. She said she forgot, but when Mom asked, she never even looked guilty. That memory returned to me now, not with anger, but clarity. Because even at 13, I had learned something I wouldn't fully understand until this very night, that some girls are taught they deserve the spotlight and others are taught to hold it steady for them. I had spent years holding it for her. But not anymore. Evan's small hand wrapped around mine as the final dance ended. His cheeks were flushed. He had danced through 4 songs, a tray of mini cupcakes, and at least 3 aunts who had finally noticed how tall he had grown. One even said, "You look just like your mama," and he had smiled with his whole body. We stepped outside the tent as bubbles filled the air. Not real bubbles, these were from 2 long rows of plastic wands the guests had been handed. The wedding planner had coordinated it, timing the bubble exit with the couple's final walk toward the getaway car. A champagne-colored vintage Bentley waited by the curb, the kind of detail Celeste had dreamed of since her Pinterest boards in college. "Do we have to blow bubbles too?" Evan asked, watching the line form. "No," I said gently. "We're just watching." He nodded, slipping his hand into mine again. Then came the announcement. "Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. and Mrs. Graham Arden." Cheers erupted, the tent flaps pulled wide. Celeste and Graham stepped out, arms linked. She looked radiant, of course, white lace and gold heels, veil floating behind her like a final curtain. He smiled politely, his hand raised just enough to greet the crowd. The bubbles floated around them like soft punctuation. The photographer ran backward, snapping shots. Bridesmaids dabbed at tears that may or may not have been real. Celeste didn't look toward me. Not once. But I watched her. I watched the girl who once told me that Mom loved me out of obligation, but loved her because she wanted to. I remembered every time I was made to be the helper, the watcher, the cleanup crew to her life's big stage. And I realized something so simple it nearly broke me. She wasn't the villain. She was the one they chose to center, over and over again. It was never her alone, it was the way our parents, our friends, even our extended family played into the script. And I had been too quiet to disrupt it, until today. "Are they leaving now?" Evan asked. "Yes," I said. "Their car is right there." He looked up at me. "But you didn't give her a gift." That caught me off guard. I had a set of monogrammed napkins and custom wine glasses. I sent them weeks ago. Not expensive, but thoughtful. "She already got it," I said, "but not everything needs to be opened in front of a crowd." Evan thought for a moment. "Did she say thank you?" I smiled gently. "Number." "But I didn't give it for that." He nodded. "I'm proud of you, Mama." The world slowed. I crouched down, eye level with him, brushing a crumb from his cheek. "Why?" "Because you were kind, even when it was hard." That was the gift I hadn't expected. Not the seat at the table. Not the slice of cake. Not even the groom's subtle shift in tone. It was this. My son seeing me fully, not as the woman who stayed silent, but as the one who chose peace over permission. I stood slowly as the crowd began to thin. The car engine started. Celeste and Graham climbed inside. The cheers had faded now to casual laughter, people checking their phones, planning rides back to their hotels. The glow of the wedding had dimmed. That was when someone touched my shoulder. I turned. It was Graham's mother, Rebecca Arden. She was in a navy shawl now, heels traded for flats, makeup faded just enough to see the real lines in her face. She smiled with the kind of calm that didn't need to say much. "I wanted to say thank you," she said. "For what?" "For being the one who taught your son to be so gentle." I blinked. "Oh, thank you. That means a lot." She leaned in slightly. "Graham sees it, you know." I tilted my head. "Sees what?" She smiled. The difference between noise and grace. Then she walked away. No dramatic music, no loud moment of triumph. Just footsteps fading into the night. I stood there for a while longer. Long enough to feel the air grow colder, long enough for Evan to start yawning, long enough to watch the moon rise above the tent that had once been her world, and now just looked like fabric. Then we left. Not with a bang, not with a scene. Just the two of us, walking to the car. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel behind her. I felt ahead of myself. There is a kind of silence that comes after weddings. Not the romantic kind, not the dreamy lull of lanterns swaying and music fading into soft laughter. I mean the silence after everything has been taken down, the centerpieces boxed, the heels kicked off, the champagne gone warm in half-filled flutes left behind. It was that kind of silence I drove home in. Evan was asleep in the back seat, seatbelt snug across his small chest, a piece of tissue paper clutched in his hand from the wedding favor bag. He had danced, eaten, been noticed. That was enough for him. Maybe more than enough. For me, though, it was a reckoning. I kept one hand on the wheel and the other lightly touching my necklace, a small pendant my mother gave me when I turned 18. She said it was for luck. But she gave Celeste a bracelet made of real pearls. I had told myself I didn't care, but even small things can echo across years when you've been taught to shrink yourself. That night, in the soft hum of the freeway, I let the truth land fully. I had been raised to lose to her, not by force, but by rhythm. Celeste always went first, at everything, first to get a ride, first to be congratulated, first to be believed, and I was the afterthought, the second choice, the good helper. The dependable one. I was the one who could handle it, so no one ever asked if I was okay. That dynamic doesn't leave you when you leave home. It follows you into friendships, into work meetings, into romantic relationships where you start apologizing before you speak. It followed me into motherhood, too. There were moments I nearly repeated the same patterns with Evan, sidelining my own needs, trying to make myself smaller so others could be comfortable. But children have a way of holding up a mirror to your spirit. They notice the weight you carry even when you smile. That wedding night was the first time in years I didn't feel small around my sister. Not because I said something brilliant, not because anyone gave me a grand apology, but because I realized I didn't need the wedding crowd to see me. I finally saw myself, and I saw her clearly too. Not as the enemy, but as the product of a family system that rewarded charm over care, sparkle over substance. She had learned to survive by shining brighter, even if it meant dimming me in the process. That kind of survival isn't glamorous, it's just sad, but it wasn't my sadness to carry anymore. I pulled into our driveway at 11:12 p.m. Evan stirred only slightly as I carried him inside, his head resting against my shoulder the way it used to when he was 3. I tucked him into bed, brushed the hair from his forehead, and turned off the light. Then I went into the kitchen. I didn't pour wine, I didn't scroll through my phone, I just sat. And for the first time, I didn't replay the worst parts of the night. I remembered the good parts. The moment Evan danced freely without looking back at me. The silence in the tent when Graham handed me a slice of cake. The way Rebecca Arden looked at me with quiet gratitude. The way Kayla, for all her sharpness, couldn't make me flinch. And Celeste, who tried so hard to win something that no longer mattered to me. I didn't need to be right anymore. I just needed to be free. There was a single envelope on my counter, the kind you forget to open when life is too busy. It had been wedged between mail for days. I opened it absent-mindedly. It was a note from my aunt, my mother's sister, someone I hadn't heard from in nearly a year. Inside was a small card and a check. "For you and Evan," it read, "to help with next summer's trip. I hope you take it, and I hope you know, not everyone chose to look away. Love, Aunt Renee." My eyes blurred, just for a moment, because sometimes, when you finally stop begging the wrong people to notice you, someone quietly does. I closed the envelope and placed it in the drawer. Then I stood and turned off the light. My phone buzzed once. A message from Celeste. Just 3 words. "You made tonight hard." No punctuation, no emotion, just blame, as always. I stared at the message, and for the first time in my life, I didn't respond. I didn't explain, I didn't defend, I didn't offer kindness to someone who weaponized it. I simply turned off the screen and let the quiet carry me to sleep, The next morning I didn't check my phone. Not out of defiance, just peace. I woke slowly, the way people do after a long storm. Evan was already in the kitchen, pouring cereal into a bowl too small for the amount he wanted. I let him. He had danced harder than anyone last night, and there are some battles even responsible mothers don't need to fight. "Did Aunt Celeste message you?" he asked. I paused at the coffee pot. She did. What did she say? "She thinks I made the wedding hard." Evan frowned. "That doesn't even make sense. You didn't do anything." I smiled at him. Sometimes doing nothing is what unsettles people most. He nodded like he understood, like he had seen enough already to believe that truth. We spent the morning as if it were any other Sunday. Laundry, leftover pizza, a walk around the block. The ordinary felt sacred, as if the silence we carried now had room to breathe. It was around noon when I opened the message again. "You made tonight hard." It still sat there, unread, but not unseen. I hovered over the keyboard, not to respond, just to observe how little it moved me. There had been a time not long ago when a message like that would have kept me up all night. I would have crafted long replies, trying to soften the blow, trying to be the bigger sister, trying to remind her I wasn't the enemy, but not anymore. Not since last night. Because when the wedding crowd watched her walk out beneath the bubbles and fairy lights, it wasn't her entrance they remembered. It was the exit she couldn't control. Mine. I didn't make a scene. I didn't have to. That was the thing no one teaches you about boundaries. They are quiet. They are not walls you build to punish someone else. They are doors you walk through and close gently behind you. And once they're closed, peace doesn't knock for permission. Around 3 p.m., my phone buzzed again. Another message, this time from Kayla. "You got what you wanted. Hope it was worth it." I almost laughed. It wasn't worth it. It was more than worth it. Because for the first time, I didn't answer to her. I answered to myself. I didn't reply to Kayla either. Instead, I scrolled back through my camera roll, past the posed wedding photos, past the ones where Celeste shined like a showroom bride, and found the one I had forgotten Evan snapped. Just before dessert, it was me, sitting at the back table, one arm resting on the chair, head tilted, eyes clear. There was no bitterness in my face, no anger, just a woman at peace. The soft lights behind me blurred like a halo. I looked older than I felt, but stronger than I ever expected. I sent that photo to no one. I kept it for myself. That was the difference between who I was and who I had become. I no longer needed an audience to validate my value. I had seen enough from the inside. By evening, the house was quiet. Evan was doing homework, humming under his breath. I stepped out onto the back porch, mug in hand, sweater wrapped tight. Fall had come early this year. The air smelled like endings and eucalyptus. And I thought about all the weddings I'd imagined growing up, how I once dreamed of my own someday. But dreams shift when your reality is shaped by someone else's spotlight. I had been so busy standing to the side of hers, I never paused to see what kind of life I could build without a stage. Now I knew, and I didn't need a diamond ring or wedding song to claim it. I had something better. Dignity. That was when I saw it. Celeste had finally deleted the message. Her last words gone, vanished from the thread. Maybe she regretted it. Or maybe she was just reclaiming the last ounce of control. Either way, I didn't care, because sometimes the final word isn't a word at all. It's the silence you choose instead. And in that moment, as the light dipped beyond the backyard fence and the wind brushed against my skin, I whispered one sentence into the dusk. "I'm done." Not out loud. Not for anyone else to hear. Just for me. Because closure isn't something you get from others. It's the weight you finally let go of, when you realize it was never yours to carry. It had been 3 days since the wedding, and I still hadn't heard from my mother. No "thank you for coming," no "did you get home safe," no comment on the toast, the seating, the photo album I wrapped in linen and ribbon just for her. But silence from my mother wasn't new. Her love had always been quiet. Too quiet. Only when Celeste was involved did it find a voice. So when my phone rang mid-morning and I saw her name flash across the screen, I already knew why she was calling. "Hi, sweetheart," she said, too softly. She only used that tone when something uncomfortable was coming. I braced myself. "Hi, Mom," I replied. "I wanted to talk about the wedding," she began. "I wasn't sure when to call." "It's been 3 days," I said flatly. She paused. "I know, I wanted to give you space." A strange sentence coming from the woman who'd spent most of my life asking me to make space. For Celeste, for guests, for family pride. She cleared her throat. Celeste was hurt. Hurt? "She didn't expect you to leave so early." I blinked at the sheer audacity of it. "I left after the cake, after the bouquet, after the toasts. What more was I supposed to stay for?" "She said you didn't even say goodbye." "She didn't say anything worth staying for." Another pause. "She's your sister." "And I'm your daughter," I said. "But that didn't stop you from laughing when she turned me into a punchline." "I wasn't laughing at you." "You weren't defending me either." The silence thickened, heavy with years of favoritism, with every time I'd watched Celeste fall apart and be comforted, while I'd held myself together and been ignored. "She didn't mean anything by it," my mother said, her voice smaller now. "She never does. That's the problem." There was a pause, a deep breath. Then something shifted. "I opened the photo album," she said, and for a moment, her tone was different. Measured. Honest. "I forgot about those pictures. I don't even remember taking some of them." "I took most of them," I said. "You did?" "Yes. I wanted someone to remember the parts of our family that weren't always pretty. Or perfect." "I saw the one of you on the porch," she said softly. "In the rain." I knew exactly which photo she meant. I was 6, soaked through, standing in socks because I had given my shoes to Celeste after she stepped in a puddle and cried. I had my arms wrapped around her like a little guardian. "You gave her your shoes that day," my mom said. "I didn't remember that." "Of course you didn't. You were busy drying her off, not me." She was quiet. "I don't say this enough," she finally whispered, "but you were always the one who held things together." "I know. I should have said it then." "You didn't." Another pause. "I didn't know how to mother you. You didn't need me the same way Celeste did." "That doesn't mean I didn't need anything," I said. "I thought being strong meant you didn't need affirmation, that you didn't need protection. It just meant I learned to go without." She swallowed that truth. I could hear it in the silence that followed. "She's always been so fragile," she whispered, "and you've always chosen to protect her." She needed it. "And I didn't?" I asked. For once, she didn't offer an answer. That was the first sign she was really listening. "She thinks I ruined her night," I said, "because I didn't laugh at being ridiculed, because I walked away instead of making a scene." "She didn't know what to do when you didn't play along." "No one did." Then finally she said something different. "I'm sorry. It wasn't dramatic, it wasn't rehearsed, but it was real. I'm sorry for what I didn't see, and for not speaking up when I should have." I blinked. "I wanted you to be proud of me," I admitted. "I am," she said. "I just never knew how to show it." I didn't cry, I didn't sigh, I just breathed a little easier. Before we hung up, she asked, "Will you be coming for Thanksgiving?" "I don't know." There was a beat. "I understand," she said. After the call ended, I stepped into the hallway and opened the linen closet. There, tucked inside a paper shopping bag, was a second gift I'd brought to the wedding. A framed photo, one no one had seen. Celeste and I, ages 4 and 9. She in a sparkly tutu, me kneeling beside her in jeans, lacing her shoes. My face was turned, half out of frame, but unmistakably mine. I had left it on the gift table with a handwritten note taped to the back. But when I left the wedding, it was still there, unclaimed. That was when I knew. No one had noticed it wasn't from a guest. No one had even turned it over, so I took it with me. Now, in the quiet of my own hallway, I finally flipped the photo around and read the note aloud. Sometimes the people who keep things running don't make it into the spotlight, but they remember everything. And sometimes they walk away not because they're angry, but because they've finally learned to love themselves more than applause. I folded the note and left the frame inside the closet. Not because it didn't matter, but because it mattered too much to be wasted on the wrong audience. The accusation came in a group text, 3 days after my mother called, 4 days after the wedding, 1 week after I thought I could move on. Can we all just acknowledge that this is about jealousy? Celeste had written it. Not to me directly. She sent it to our old group thread, me, her, Kayla, and 2 cousins who hadn't replied to a family text in over a year. Jealous of what? Kayla replied with a laughing emoji. Of finally not being the center of attention, Celeste typed. It sat there, blue bubble, full volume, meant to be seen. I read it 3 times, the first time with confusion, the second with disbelief, and the third with complete clarity. Because that, right there, was the core of it all. Not the table in the back, not the missing toast, not the silence after her mockery. Celeste believed everything was about her. She believed I wanted what she had. What she never knew, never even thought to ask, was who paid for her perfect wedding in the first place. I hadn't planned to say anything, but her message stirred something deeper than anger. It stirred truth. So I didn't respond in the group thread. I called Graham. He picked up on the second ring. Hey, is everything okay? You should ask your wife what she means by jealous. He was quiet for a moment. Did something happen? She's telling people I tried to ruin the wedding. Another pause. Then, she said you made things tense. I didn't make a speech, Graham. I didn't dance. I didn't even cry. I know. She made a joke about my divorce. You watched her do it. He exhaled. I talked to her about it. Did you tell her who paid for the flowers? Another silence. Longer this time. She doesn't know? I asked. No? And the rentals? The sound system? The shuttle? I didn't think you'd want her to. I pinched the bridge of my nose. It's not about wanting credit. It's about not being accused while she dances on a stage I helped build. He finally spoke. Do you want me to tell her? No, I said. I just want you to stop pretending I wasn't there. Then I hung up. The truth was, 6 months ago, my mother had called in a panic. Celeste's wedding budget was spiraling. Vendors were pulling out. The venue demanded full payment up front. We're $8,000 short, she whispered, and she's falling apart. I had just gotten my annual bonus, $10,000, before taxes. It was supposed to go toward a down payment, a new place, somewhere quiet with better schools for Evan. But I said yes. Not because I owed Celeste anything, but because I remembered what it felt like to be left out. And I wanted to believe, foolishly, that helping her might finally make me visible. That was my mistake. I didn't need her to see me. I needed to stop expecting that she ever would. A week passed, then 2. No calls, no texts. Just the cold silence that follows passive-aggressive warfare. Then one night Graham sent me a message. No subject, just a link. An email thread forwarded from the florist. The line at the top read, per invoice, balance settled by Juliet M. via Zelle. And there it was. My name, my account, clear as crystal. Underneath it, one new message, sent from Celeste's Gmail. Why would she do that and not say anything? No answer yet. I read it twice. Then again. Why would I do that and not say anything? Because love doesn't need to be announced. Because support doesn't always come with strings. Because if she'd ever stopped looking at me as a rival, she might have recognized a sister. And because I wasn't jealous, I was tired. Tired of buying seats at a table where I was always served silence. That Sunday, I took Evan to the bookstore. We walked past a bride taking pictures outside, white dress blowing in the wind, her veil snagged on the corner of a bench. Evan pointed. She looks like Aunt Celeste? She does, I agreed. Do you think she's nice? I watched the bride for a moment. She looked impatient, glancing at her phone while the groom adjusted his boutonniere. I think, I said, she has no idea what's happening behind her. Evan nodded like he understood. We bought 2 books and went home. That night I got one final message from Graham. Thank you. No explanation. No signature. Just that. It was enough. Because someone saw it. Not just what I gave, but what I withheld. Celeste could tell the story any way she wanted, but I knew the truth, and now so did her husband. I used to think closure came in the form of an apology, a speech, a reckoning, a moment where the people who hurt you finally looked you in the eye and admitted what they did. But now I know that closure is quieter than that. It sounds like your own footsteps walking away, without needing anyone to follow. It had been almost a month since the wedding. No new messages from Celeste, no calls from my mother, not even a forwarded video from the reception, which I knew had been filmed from every possible angle. But I was fine. Actually, I was better than fine, because for the first time in years I wasn't waiting to be included. The house felt different now. I had cleaned the corners, rearranged the furniture, even swapped out the rug in the living room, the one my mother picked out when I first got divorced, the one she said would make the space feel less lonely. Now I chose a bold one. Indigo and deep crimson, a color Celeste once called too dramatic. It felt just right. Evan came home from school with a card he made in art class, a woman drawn in marker, standing tall beside a crooked little house with stars above it. "This is you," he said, "and this is where we live now." "I love it," I said, holding back the lump in my throat. "Do you miss Aunt Celeste?" he asked. I thought about that. About her laugh at the wedding, the way she avoided eye contact when she told the crowd I was the family example of what not to do. "I miss the idea of her," I said. "What does that mean?" "It means sometimes people turn into someone else, and you have to let go of who you thought they were." He seemed to understand in his 7-year-old way. "Can I put this on the fridge?" he asked. "Yes," I smiled. "Right in the middle." That weekend, I drove out to the coast. A friend of mine had invited me and Evan to visit, an old college roommate who owned a bookstore in a sleepy beach town that smelled of salt and pine. She had offered to put us up in the upstairs apartment for the weekend. "You could use a reset," she said. She had no idea how right she was. On Sunday morning, while Evan built sandcastles with her son, I stood outside the bookstore with a coffee and watched the street fill with early risers. There was a small shop across the way, vintage linens, pressed glassware, a little side room filled with old wedding dresses. A sign in the window read, "New owners, grand reopening in October." I walked in. The air smelled of cedar and thyme. A young woman behind the counter greeted me with a nod, then returned to tagging a set of etched wine glasses. I wandered to the back room. Dozens of gowns hung along one wall, lace, satin, silk. Not modern, not trendy, just timeless. And then I saw it. A simple A-line dress with a faint blush underlay. No sequins, no crystals, just grace. There was a note on the tag. Donated anonymously. Worn once, loved well. I stood there for a long moment, not because I wanted to try it on, but because something about it reminded me of who I used to be, the version of me that believed in applause, in being seen, in earning love. Now, I didn't need to be seen. I needed to be steady. Back at the apartment, my phone buzzed. A message from my mother. "Your photo is on our mantle, the one from the album. I see it every morning." No explanation, no commentary, just that. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. That was the difference now. I no longer lived in reaction. Monday morning, Evan and I packed up the car to return home. As we buckled in, he looked at me and said, "Mom?" "Yes?" "Do weddings always make people sad?" I blinked. "Not always." "Yours will be better," he said. I smiled. "I'm not planning one." He shrugged. "But if you did, I'd sit in the front row." That stayed with me, not because it was sweet, but because it reminded me, some people choose you without needing to be impressed, without needing you to shrink, without rewriting your story. They just see you. We drove home. No grand declarations, no new confrontations, Just a mother and a son in a car, windows down, silence between songs on the radio. When we got home, I lit a candle, opened my laptop, and typed the first sentence of something I hadn't touched in years. My novel. The one I abandoned after the divorce, after Celeste said, "You should just focus on stability, not dreams." Now, I opened a blank document. And began again. That night, as the sun dipped below the rooftops, I stepped outside and looked at the sky. No confetti, no applause, just stillness. And in that stillness, peace. The wedding ended, but I walked into something better. Not louder, not grander, just honest. Because sometimes the real celebration is not what happens under chandeliers and vows. It's what happens the moment you choose your own peace over their approval. This story isn't about a sister who mocked you. It's about the woman who didn't let that mockery define her. She could have argued. She could have exposed the truth. Instead, she chose dignity and stillness. If you've ever given more than you got, stayed silent while others performed, or waited years to be seen, then maybe this story wasn't just hers. Maybe it was yours too. If this story touched you, subscribe to Revenge with Seren, because some revenge needs no knives, no screaming. Just one spotlight, one shining nameplate, and someone they once dismissed, rising, brilliant and unshaken. See you in the next story.